In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where ancient civilizations rise and fall like cosmic waves, love knows no boundaries. But what happens when the most powerful empress in known space discovers that her beloved husband, the gentle, unassuming man she married for love, belongs to a species that every military strategist fears to name aloud? Queen HFY had conquered 14 star systems before she turned 30. She had bent the will of warrior races and made peace with cosmic horrors that haunted the void between stars. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the moment when she learned that her husband David wasn't just from a primitive outer rim world. He was human, and the galaxy was about to remember why that word once made entire fleets turn and flee into the darkness of space. This is the story of how the greatest love in the universe became the catalyst for the most terrifying display of human potential the galaxy had ever witnessed. Because when you threaten what a human loves most, you don't just face an individual. You face the awakening of an entire species that has spent millennia learning one thing better than any other race in existence: how to turn impossible odds into inevitable victory. The Vorthak Empire thought they were conquering another weak system. They had no idea they were about to poke humanity's sleeping dragon. The morning light of Kepler's binary suns filtered through the crystal walls of the royal chambers, casting rainbow patterns across the sleeping form of Queen HFY of the Altrian Empire. Her scales shimmered with a deep blue-green hue that marked her as royalty among her people, and her four arms were wrapped protectively around the warm, pale form beside her. David Chun stirred first, as he always did. His human biology required less sleep than his wife's, a fact that had puzzled the royal physicians when they first met. Now, 5 years into their marriage, it was simply part of their routine. He would wake early, prepare breakfast with ingredients from across the galaxy, and have it ready when Zara opened her golden eyes. "Good morning, my love," he whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to the crest of small horns that crowned her head. Zara's people, the Altarians, were magnificent beings, tall, powerful, with natural armor plating and for arms that made them formidable in both war and peace. David, by comparison, looked almost fragile beside her 7-foot frame. Zara's eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on her husband's face. Even after all this time, his appearance still fascinated her. Humans were so different from any species she had encountered. No natural weapons, no armor, no obvious evolutionary advantages. Yet something about David had captured her heart from the moment they met at the diplomatic conference on Nexus Station. "Another day of ruling the galaxy awaits," she said with a soft rumble that was the Altarian equivalent of a sigh. "Sometimes I wish we could just stay here forever." David smiled, running his fingers along one of her four arms. "The galaxy needs you, Zara. You've brought more peace to this sector than anyone in 1,000 years. She sat up, her natural grace making the movement seem effortless despite her size. "Only because I have you to come home to. You ground me, David. Before you, I was just another conqueror. You taught me that true strength comes from protecting, not just defeating." This was true, and both of them knew it. When Zara had first taken the throne 15 years ago, she had been known throughout the galaxy as the Iron Empress. Her military campaigns were swift, brutal, and absolutely effective. System after system had fallen to her tactical genius and the overwhelming might of the Altarian fleet. But there had been no joy in those victories, no real purpose beyond expansion and power. David had changed everything. He had been part of a small diplomatic envoy from what the galaxy considered a minor outer rim species. The humans had no empire, no vast fleets, no technological marvels that impressed the great powers. They were simply there, representing their small cluster of worlds, hoping to establish trade relationships. Most representatives from such species were nervous, overwhelmed by being in the presence of galactic royalty. David had been different. He had spoken with quiet confidence, asked thoughtful questions, and when the formal proceedings ended, he had approached her directly. "Your Majesty," he had said, "would you like to see something beautiful?" No one had ever asked her that question before. Curious despite herself, she had agreed. He had led her to an observation deck and pointed out a distant nebula. "My people have a saying," David had told her. "We are all made of star stuff. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a dying star billions of years ago. You and I, different as we are, share that same cosmic heritage. It was such a human thing to say, she realized now. No other species in the galaxy looked at the universe quite that way. Most saw resources to be claimed, territories to be defended, enemies to be defeated. Humans saw connection, beauty, shared origins across impossible distances. They had talked through the night, and by morning, Zara knew her life had changed forever. The marriage had shocked the galaxy. An empress marrying an unknown alien from an insignificant species? The political ramifications had been enormous. Some of her own nobles had called it a mistake that weakened the empire. Allied governments had questioned her judgment. Enemy states had assumed it was some elaborate political maneuvering. But David had proven them all wrong. He had no political ambitions, no secret agendas. He genuinely loved Zara for who she was beneath the crown and titles. More importantly, his presence had made her a better ruler. Where she had once solved problems with force, he encouraged her to seek diplomatic solutions. Where she had inspired fear, he helped her inspire loyalty. The Altarian Empire had become stronger, more prosperous, and more respected than ever before. Now, as David prepared breakfast in their private quarters, Zara couldn't imagine her life any other way. She watched him work, marveling at the efficient way he moved despite having only 2 arms. Humans, she had learned, were remarkably adaptable. David had mastered Altarian cooking techniques, learned to navigate the complex protocols of imperial life, and somehow managed to remain completely himself through it all. The Council of Ministers wants to brief you about the situation in the Outer Nebula, David said, setting a plate before her. The meal was a perfect fusion of Altarian and human culinary traditions, something he had pioneered that had actually become fashionable throughout the Empire. More border skirmishes with the Vorthak Empire, I assume, Zara replied, taking a bite. The flavors were complex and satisfying, just like their relationship. Actually, it sounds more serious this time. Admiral Kess received some disturbing intelligence reports. Zara's expression darkened. The Vorthak Empire had been a growing concern for the past 2 years. Unlike the Altarians, who conquered to create order and prosperity, the Vorthak seemed to destroy for the sheer joy of destruction. They were a relatively new power, emerging from the galactic core with technology that was both advanced and brutal. What kind of intelligence? She asked. David hesitated. They've been asking questions about you. About us. Specifically about human space and my homeworld. This was troubling news. Very few beings in the galaxy knew exactly where David came from. It had been a deliberate decision to keep that information restricted. Not because there was anything to hide, but because David preferred privacy and Zara respected that. I should attend the briefing, she decided. Will you come with me? Of course. An hour later, they sat in the Imperial Council chamber, a vast room with holographic displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Admiral Kess, Zara's oldest friend and most trusted military advisor, stood before a 3-dimensional map highlighting recent Vorthak movements. Your Majesty, Kess began, her natural Altarian formality unchanged by decades of friendship. Our intelligence network has intercepted several concerning communications from Vorthak space. They appear to be conducting detailed reconnaissance on what they call the Empress's pet species. David felt a chill run down his spine. Beside him, Zara's scales darkened to a deeper blue, a sign of anger among her people. What exactly are they looking for? Zara asked, her voice carrying the edge that had once made enemies tremble. Geographic data about human colonies, population centers, technological capabilities, and, most concerning, detailed psychological profiles on human behavior patterns. Why would they care about any of that? David asked. My people aren't a threat to anyone. We don't have a fleet that could challenge a system government, let alone a galactic empire. Admiral Kess exchanged a meaningful glance with Zara. Sir, with respect, I believe they see you as a weakness they can exploit. Intelligence suggests they're planning to attack human space not as an end in itself, but as a way to motivate Her Majesty. The room fell silent. David felt the blood drain from his face as the implications became clear. The Vorthak weren't interested in human territory or resources. They wanted to hurt him to hurt Zara. They wouldn't dare, Zara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The Outer Systems Treaty specifically protects developing species from— The Vorthack have never signed the Outer Systems Treaty, Kess interrupted gently. And our analysts believe they're convinced that if they can eliminate your personal connection to humanity, you'll be more likely to negotiate territorial concessions rather than risk full-scale war. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the crystal floor. I need to warn my people. If the Vorthack are planning to attack human space, Earth needs to know. The colonies need time to evacuate civilian populations. David, wait, Zara called after him. But he was already heading for the door. The Admiral watched him go, then turned to her Empress. Your Majesty, there's something else. Something I didn't want to discuss in front of your husband. Zara's golden eyes narrowed. Speak. Our intelligence indicates the Vorthack have been researching human space for over a year. They've identified what they believe to be critical infrastructure targets. But, Majesty, they don't just plan to attack. They plan to broadcast it. They want you to watch. The silence that followed was broken only by the subtle hum of the room's environmental systems. When Zara finally spoke, her voice carried a cold fury that Admiral Kess had not heard since the early days of the Iron Empress. Double our border patrols immediately. I want every ship we can spare moved to defensive positions around the Outer Nebula approaches. And send a message to the Vorthack High Command through diplomatic channels. What should the message say? Tell them that the Altarian Empire considers any aggressive action against human space to be an act of war against us directly. Tell them that Queen Zora-THUSS herself guarantees the safety of every human world. Admiral Kess nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Majesty, our fleet is powerful, but the Vorthack have been building their forces for years. If they're willing to risk open war with us, they must believe they have an advantage we don't know about. Then, we'll have to remind them why that's a mistake, Zara replied, standing and moving to the holographic display. She studied the star charts, her tactical mind automatically calculating distances, supply lines, and strategic positions. But her thoughts kept returning to David. He was in their private quarters now, probably trying to establish communication with Earth. His loyalty was divided between his love for her and his responsibility to his own species, and that division was exactly what the Vorthack were counting on. What they didn't understand was that by threatening David's people, they had just made the biggest tactical error in galactic history. They saw a soft-hearted human married to an alien queen, and they thought they could use him as leverage. They had no idea that David Chen wasn't just any human. He was the human who had taught the Iron Empress how to love. And now they were about to learn what happened when someone threatened the thing a human loved most. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had been so carefully managed, why human space was maintained as a protected region, and why the oldest species in the galaxy still whispered warnings about the species that fights with the fury of dying stars. The Vorthack thought they were targeting a weakness. They were actually about to awaken something that had been sleeping peacefully among the Outer Rim worlds for over 50 years. They were about to discover that humans weren't just David's species. They were his family. And family was the one thing humans had never learned to share. David stood in the communication chamber of the royal palace, his hands trembling slightly as he initiated the quantum link to Earth. The technology was Altarian, far more advanced than anything humanity currently possessed, but the protocols for human communication networks were embedded in his personal access codes. The wait seemed eternal. Lightspeed communication across galactic distances was impossible, but quantum entanglement networks allowed near-instantaneous contact between any 2 points in space. The problem was establishing the initial connection through the various relay stations between Altarian space and human territory. Finally, a familiar face appeared on the holographic display. Director Sarah Martinez of Earth's Colonial Defense Administration looked tired, older than when David had last seen her during his brief visit home 2 years ago. David, her voice carried surprise and concern. This is unexpected. Is everything all right? Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. There's no time for pleasantries. Earth and all the human colonies are in immediate danger. Director Martinez's expression shifted instantly to full attention. In the background, David could see other figures moving into view. President Chun, no relation, despite the shared surname, Admiral Rodriguez, and several other members of Earth's governing council. What kind of danger? Martinez asked, her voice now carrying the crisp authority David remembered from their academy days together. An alien empire called the Vorthak is planning to attack human space. This isn't a territorial dispute or a resource grab. They want to hurt my people to use as leverage against Zara. President Chun stepped forward. David, slow down. Start from the beginning. What's the Vorthak Empire? How do they even know about us? David took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Human space had been deliberately isolated from galactic politics for good reasons, and most humans had no idea how complex and dangerous the larger galaxy could be. The Vorthak are a militaristic empire from the galactic core. They've been expanding aggressively for the past 5 years. Sarah, remember when I told you that Zara's marriage to me was controversial among some galactic powers? You mentioned there were political complications. Martinez nodded. The Vorthak see me as a weakness they can exploit. They believe that if they attack human worlds, Zara will be so devastated that she'll make territorial concessions to end the conflict quickly. Admiral Rodriguez leaned into the frame. David, no offense, but why would an alien empire care about one man's relationship? Surely they have bigger strategic concerns. David almost smiled at the question. It was such a human way of thinking, assuming that personal relationships were separate from political power. Most species in the galaxy understood that attacking an emperor's loved ones was a declaration of total war, but humans had never really developed the concept of absolute monarchy. Admiral, Zara isn't just my wife. She's the absolute ruler of 14 star systems. Her empire has a fleet of over 12,000 warships and controls trade routes that connect half the galaxy. When she married me, it became known throughout galactic space that humanity was under her personal protection. And now someone wants to test that protection, President Chun said grimly. Exactly, but there's more. The Vorthak have been researching human space for over a year. They have detailed intelligence about our colonies, our infrastructure, our population centers. This isn't a random attack. They've been planning this specifically to cause maximum psychological damage. The room on Earth fell silent. Finally, Martinez spoke. What do you need from us? Start evacuating civilian populations from the outer colonies immediately. Focus on families with children, non-essential personnel, anyone who can't contribute to defense efforts. Move them deeper into human space, preferably to Earth or the core worlds. David, Admiral Rodriguez interrupted. We're talking about millions of people. The logistics alone would take months, and we don't have the ships. You have to try. I know it seems impossible, but son, President Chun said gently, we're grateful for the warning, but we need to be realistic about our capabilities. Our entire colonial fleet consists of maybe 300 ships, most of which are cargo vessels or short-range patrol craft. We don't have a military force that could evacuate entire worlds. David felt frustration building in his chest. This was the problem with humanity's isolation from galactic affairs. They had no concept of the scale of interstellar warfare. Then, prepare your defenses. Activate every militia unit, call up all reserves, start producing weapons and ammunition. The Vorthak will come soon, and when they do, David. Martinez's voice was calm, but firm. Our defenses are designed to handle pirates and smugglers, not an alien empire. If these Vorthak have the kind of fleet you're describing, there's nothing we can do militarily that would make a difference. You don't understand, David said, his voice rising. They're not coming to conquer. They're coming to destroy. They want to broadcast the attack, so Zara has to watch her husband's people die. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, Admiral Rodriguez spoke. What about your wife's fleet? Can't she protect us? She's trying, but the Vorthak have been planning this for years. They must have some kind of strategic advantage, or they wouldn't risk open war with the Altarian Empire. David, President Chun said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is there any chance that your marriage has made humanity a target for other alien empires as well? Are we going to face more situations like this? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. David had wondered the same thing himself many times over the past 5 years. By marrying Zara, He had inadvertently made humanity a piece on the galactic chessboard. I don't know, he admitted, but I do know that without Zara's protection, humanity would have been discovered and possibly enslaved or destroyed years ago. The galaxy isn't empty, and it isn't safe. There are dozens of species with the technology to wipe out human civilization without breaking a sweat. So we're trapped, Martinez said quietly. We're too weak to defend ourselves, but too connected to your wife to hide. No, David said firmly. You're not trapped. You're protected. Zara would never let anything happen to human space. But the Vorthak are betting that she'll choose to preserve her empire over saving my people. They think she's pragmatic enough to sacrifice humanity to avoid a larger war. And is she? Admiral Rodriguez asked bluntly. David's answer came without hesitation. She would burn down the entire galaxy before she let anyone hurt the people I love. Something in his tone made the human leaders look at each other with new concern. Martinez leaned forward. David, weren't you telling us? There's something else, isn't there? David closed his eyes, thinking about the classified briefings he had attended over the years, the conversations between Zara and her military advisors that he wasn't supposed to understand, the careful way galactic powers spoke about humanity when they thought he wasn't listening. There's something about humans that scares the older species, he said finally. I don't fully understand it myself, but there are records, ancient warnings about what happens when humanity gets involved in galactic wars. What kind of warnings? The kind that made the Galactic Council agree to keep human space isolated and protected. The kind that made even the most aggressive species agree to leave us alone. President Chen's expression grew troubled. David, are you saying that humanity is some kind of threat to galactic civilization? I'm saying that the last time humans were involved in an interstellar conflict, it ended with 3 species going extinct and half a dozen others retreating to the far edges of the galaxy. The communication chamber fell silent except for the hum of the quantum link. On Earth, the human leaders stared at David with a mixture of disbelief and growing fear. When did this happen? Martinez asked quietly. About 200 years ago, before first contact protocols were established, before the isolation treaties. A human colony ship was attacked by raiders, and somehow word got back to Earth. And humanity declared war on the entire concept of slavery in the galaxy. It took 30 years and cost billions of lives on both sides. But when it was over, the practice of enslaving sentient species had been completely eliminated from civilized space. Admiral Rodriguez shook his head. David, that's impossible. 200 years ago, we barely had interplanetary travel, let alone interstellar capabilities. You're thinking about official human history. But there were always humans who pushed further, explored deeper, refused to accept limitations. The generation that fought the slavery wars weren't representing any government. They were just angry. You're talking about humans we've never heard of, fighting wars with technology we didn't possess, President Chun said skeptically. I'm talking about humans doing what humans do when someone threatens their family, David replied. Getting creative, getting determined, and refusing to stop until the problem is solved permanently. Martinez was studying David's face carefully. You think the Vorthak don't know about this history? I think they know fragments, pieces, rumors. But they don't understand what they're really dealing with. Most species fight wars for territory, resources, political advantage. Humans fight wars to protect the people they love. And what happens when a species that fights for love goes up against a species that fights for conquest? David's smile was thin and cold, and for a moment, the human leaders saw something in his expression that reminded them he had been living among galactic powers for 5 years. The species that fights for conquest discovers that they brought conventional weapons to an existential fight. The implications of that statement settled over the human leadership like a shroud. Finally, Martinez spoke. What do you need us to do? Evacuate who you can. Prepare defenses everywhere else. But, most importantly, remember that you're not alone in this. Zara won't let the Vorthak succeed. And if the Vorthak have some kind of superweapon, some advantage that even your wife can't overcome. David's expression grew distant, as if he was seeing something far beyond the communication chamber. Then, they're about to learn why the galaxy keeps humanity on the outer rim. Not to protect everyone else from us, but to protect us from what we become when someone threatens our family. The quantum link terminated, leaving David alone in the Alterian communication chamber. But he wasn't really alone. Zara had been standing in the doorway for the last few minutes, listening to every word. "You didn't tell them everything," she said softly. "They're not ready for everything. Are you ready?" David turned to face his wife, seeing the concern in her golden eyes. "Zara, what really happened during the slavery wars? The official galactic records are classified above my clearance level." She moved to stand beside him, her 4 arms encircling him in a protective embrace. "The official records were classified to protect humanity, not galactic security," she said quietly. "Your species doesn't fight wars the way everyone else does. When humans decide something is unacceptable, they don't just defeat it. They make it impossible for it to ever happen again. How? By refusing to accept any outcome except total victory. By turning every tactical defeat into strategic learning. By making the cost of opposing them so high that surrender becomes the only rational choice." David leaned against her, feeling the steady rhythm of her dual hearts. "The Vorthack think they're targeting a weakness," Zara continued. "They have no idea they're about to wake up the most persistently creative species in the galaxy. And once humanity decides the Vorthack Empire is unacceptable..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The Vorthack had made their choice. Soon, humanity would make theirs. And the galaxy would remember why some sleeping giants should never be disturbed. The Vorthack strike force materialized from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like a dark tide of death. 300 ships, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive red and black markings that had become synonymous with terror across the galaxy. At their head flew the dreadnought Bone Crusher, its massive weapon arrays already powering up for the systematic destruction they had planned. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lighting. The Vorthack were an insectoid species, their society built around the concept of the hive and the absolute dominance of the strong over the weak. To them, the soft mammals they were about to slaughter were less than insects themselves. "Report," he clicked in the guttural language of his people. 7 human colonies detected in the system. "Lord Admiral," his intelligence officer replied. "Population centers range from 50,000 to 2 million beings. Defensive capabilities are minimal." Vextar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The humans had exactly the kind of technology his scouts had reported. Barely adequate for interplanetary travel, completely inadequate for military defense against a proper galactic power. Their largest warship was smaller than a Vorthack patrol vessel. "Begin recording for transmission to the Alterian Empire," he ordered. "I want every moment of this broadcast to the Empress herself." The communication array hummed to life, establishing a quantum link back to Alterian space. Soon, the alien queen would watch helplessly as her husband's people were systematically exterminated. When the horror became too much to bear, she would agree to the territorial concessions the Vorthack Empire demanded. The expansion would continue, and Vextar would be hailed as the admiral who brought the mighty Alterian Empire to heel without losing a single ship. "My Lady Empress," he said directly into the recording device, his translator rendering his words into perfect Alterian. "You are about to witness the price of defying the Vorthack Empire. Your husband's species will serve as an example to any who would stand against our expansion. This could have been avoided with simple cooperation." The first wave of attack ships swept toward the outer colony of New Geneva, a mining settlement on the system's 4th planet. The human response was exactly what Vextar had expected, a handful of patrol boats racing to intercept, their weapons so primitive they barely registered on Vorthack sensors. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are broadcasting surrender requests on multiple frequencies." "Ignore them," Vextar ordered. "This is not about conquest. This is about sending a message." The patrol boats opened fire first, their plasma cannons striking the leading Vorthack fighters. The energy discharges were so weak they didn't even penetrate the alien ship's shields. "Destroy them," Vextar commanded. The Vorthack response was swift and devastating. Energy beams lanced out from the attack ships, turning the human patrol boats into expanding clouds of debris in seconds. The slaughter had begun, but As the Vorthak fleet moved deeper into the system, something unexpected happened. More ships appeared on sensors, human ships, but these were different, larger, with energy signatures that didn't match any of the intelligence reports. Admiral, his sensor operator reported with confusion, I'm detecting significant human fleet movement throughout the system. Ships that weren't there when we arrived. Stealth technology? Vextar asked. It was possible the humans had some capabilities his scouts had missed. Negative, sir. They appear to be arriving from multiple vectors simultaneously. Vextar turned to study the tactical display himself. What he saw made no sense. Human ships were emerging from hyperspace jumps all around his fleet, not random civilian vessels fleeing in panic, but warships. Hundreds of them. Ships with energy signatures that suggested technology far more advanced than anything in the intelligence reports. This is impossible, he muttered. Our scouts mapped this entire system. The humans have no significant military presence here. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. The face that appeared on the main screen was human, but not what Vextar had expected. This was clearly a military officer, wearing a uniform that spoke of discipline and professionalism. Behind him, Vextar could see what was obviously a warship's bridge, with technology that looked disturbingly sophisticated. Vorthak fleet, the humans said calmly. This is Admiral Chun of Earth Defense Command. You have entered human space with hostile intent and have already destroyed civilian vessels. You have one chance to withdraw peacefully. Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Human, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Your primitive weapons cannot. Admiral, his sensor operator interrupted urgently. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. Sir, these aren't the weapons from our intelligence reports. These are military-grade capital ship weapons. For the first time since the operation began, Vextar felt a flutter of uncertainty. How many human ships are we detecting? 700 and climbing, sir. They're still arriving. That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated the entire human fleet numbered less than 300 vessels, mostly civilian. On the screen, Admiral Chun continued speaking with the same calm professionalism. You've made two critical errors in your intelligence assessment. First, you assumed that the ships you observed represented our total military capability. Second, you assumed that humanity would wait for you to attack before responding. What do you mean? Vextar demanded. We've been tracking your fleet since it left Vorthak space 3 weeks ago. Every human colony, every outpost, every ship that could make the journey has been converging on this system since we received warning of your approach. You're not attacking a defenseless mining colony, Admiral. You're attacking the entire human species. The tactical display updated, and Vextar felt his exoskeleton chill with shock. Over 1,000 human ships now surrounded his fleet, and more were still arriving. Worse, these weren't the crude vessels his scouts had reported. These were purpose-built warships with energy signatures that suggested weapons technology comparable to major galactic powers. This is still impossible, Vextar said. No species can mobilize this quickly. The logistics alone, you're thinking like a Vorthak, Admiral Chin replied. Centralized command, hierarchical structure, rigid operational doctrine. Humans don't work that way. When one of our colonies called for help, every human ship capable of making the journey simply came. No orders needed. No command structure required. Just family helping family. Sir, the Vorthak sensor operator's voice was tight with fear. I'm detecting something else. Energy signatures consistent with Alterian warships. A lot of them. Vextar spun to stare at the display. Emerging from hyperspace behind the human fleet were the distinctive energy signatures of Alterian dreadnoughts. Dozens of them, led by what could only be the Empress's personal flagship. The Iron Throne, he whispered. Every military officer in the galaxy knew that ship's reputation. Admiral Chun, came a new voice over the communication channel, speaking accented English. This is Queen Zurich HYSS of the Alterian Empire. Thank you for the warm welcome. Admiral Chin's expression shifted to a slight smile. Always a pleasure, Your Majesty. We saved you the good seats. Vextar watched in growing horror as the human and Alterian fleets moved into perfect formation around his forces. This wasn't the chaotic response of a primitive species caught off guard. This was a coordinated military operation between two ally powers. This is a trap, he realized aloud. No, Admiral Chun corrected from the screen. This is what happens when you threaten someone's family. You spent months planning how to hurt Queen Zura-THYSS by attacking humanity. What you fail to consider is that humans have been planning how to protect Queen Zura-THYSS by defending ourselves. The intelligence reports were exactly what we wanted you to see. Every ship you observed, every weapon scan your scouts conducted, every assessment of our capabilities, all carefully managed to give you precisely the impression we wanted you to have. Vextar's tactical mind began to process the implications. You've been planning this for years. We've been planning this since the day David Chun married our queen, Admiral Chun replied. Did you really think the most tactically brilliant military mind in the galaxy would marry into a species without considering the strategic implications? Did you imagine that humans who grew up watching alien invasion movies wouldn't have some thoughts about how to handle alien invasion reality? The Vorthack Admiral looked at his tactical display again. His 300 ships were now completely surrounded by nearly 1,500 human and Alterian vessels. But more than that, the positioning was perfect. Every possible escape route blocked, every tactical advantage neutralized. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender demands from 17 different human commanders simultaneously. How was that possible? They appear to be using a distributed command structure. Each human ship group is operating independently, but in perfect coordination with the others. Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers again. Admiral Vextar, you have 60 seconds to order your fleet to power down weapons and prepare for escort to the nearest Alterian detention facility. Any aggressive action will be met with overwhelming force. You're bluffing, Vextar said. You wouldn't risk a galactic war over one human colony. Admiral, Queen Zarathustra's voice cut through the channel like a blade. You clearly don't understand either humans or myself. This stopped being about one colony the moment you decided to broadcast my husband's people being murdered. Now, it's about demonstrating to every power in the galaxy what happens when someone threatens what we protect. The 60 seconds felt like an eternity. Vextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, seeing the same fear he felt reflected in their compound eyes. The tactical situation was hopeless. Even if they could break through the human fleet, the Alterian dreadnoughts alone outgunned his entire force. But more than that, something about the human admiral's calm professionalism was deeply unsettling. This wasn't bravado or desperation. This was the confidence of someone who had planned for exactly this scenario and was completely prepared for any choice the Vorthack might make. Sir, his sensor operator whispered, the human ships are powering up some kind of weapons system I've never seen before. What kind of system? I don't know, sir. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Admiral Chen's voice came through the channel one final time. Admiral Vextar, you came here expecting to find helpless victims. Instead, you found a species that has spent 2 centuries learning how to turn impossible odds into inevitable victory. You have 10 seconds to surrender. Vextar closed his eyes, seeing his career, his reputation, and his life dissolving before him. The Vorthack Empire had built its expansion on the assumption that smaller species could be intimidated through shows of overwhelming force. But they had never encountered a species that responded to intimidation by becoming more dangerous. All ships, he said quietly into his command channel, power down weapons and prepare to surrender. Sir, his tactical officer asked in disbelief. Look at the display, Vextar replied. We're not just outgunned. We're outthought, outmaneuvered, and completely surrounded by people who have been planning this moment since before we knew they existed. Continuing this fight would be suicide. As the Vorthack weapons powered down, Admiral Chen's expression remained professional but satisfied. Thank you for making the smart choice, Admiral. Alterian escorts will guide you to detention facilities where you'll be treated according to galactic law. But even as he coordinated the surrender, Chen was thinking about the larger implications. The Vorthack Empire had just learned that humanity was not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be respected. More importantly, they had learned that threatening humanity meant facing not just human retaliation, but the combined fury of every alliance humanity had built. The galaxy was about to discover that the quiet species from the Outer Rim had spent 50 years of isolation building something unprecedented, a military doctrine based not on conquest or domination, but on the absolute protection of everything they loved. And they were very, very good at it. The aftermath of the Vorthak surrender sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization that would be felt for generations. In the great halls of the Galactic Council on Nexus Station, representatives from 100 species gathered in emergency session, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Chancellor Mordun of the ancient ethereal collective called the Assembly to order, his translucent form shimmering with barely contained anxiety. The Ethereals were one of the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy, their memories stretching back millennia, and they understood the implications of what had occurred better than most. Fellow beings, he began, his voice carrying through the universal translation matrix, we have all received the recordings of the encounter in human space. The question before us is simple. What do we do about humanity? Ambassador Clethvar of the Hegemony Federation raised a tentacle. With respect, Chancellor, I believe the question is what we do about the Human-Altarian Alliance. Queen HFY has clearly been building a combined military force that rivals any power in the galaxy. No, interrupted Representative Zelnaga from the Silicon Consortium, her crystalline voice ringing like bells. You're all missing the critical point. The humans didn't just defeat the Vorthak fleet. They were waiting for them. This implies intelligence networks, advanced warning systems, and strategic planning capabilities that none of us detected. Throughout the chamber, concerned murmurs rose from dozens of species. The recording of the battle had been studied frame by military analysts across known space, and the conclusions were deeply troubling for the existing galactic power structure. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Thex from the Merchant Guilds, we should invite a human representative to address these concerns directly. The suggestion was met with immediate and heated debate. Some species supported the idea, arguing that direct communication was preferable to speculation. Others worried that even acknowledging human military capability would destabilize existing treaties and alliances. Meanwhile, in human space, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. David Chun sat in the observation lounge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Chen's flagship, watching the stream of ships that continued to arrive in the Kepler 442 system. The surrender of the Vorthak fleet had ended the immediate crisis, but it had also revealed something about humanity that even David himself hadn't fully understood. I had no idea, he said quietly to Admiral Chun, who was seated across from him with a cup of coffee that looked remarkably normal despite their exotic surroundings. About the fleet? About our capabilities? Or about the planning? Admiral Chun asked with a slight smile. The Admiral was actually David's great-uncle, though they had never met before today. All of it. When I warned Earth about the Vorthak threat, I expected maybe a few hundred ships to respond. Instead, over 1,000 vessels converged on this system within days. Ships I didn't even know existed. Admiral Chun took a sip of his coffee before responding. David, when you married Queen HFY 5 years ago, it changed everything for humanity. Not just diplomatically, but strategically. We suddenly found ourselves connected to galactic civilization in a way we had never been before. But the isolation treaties are still in effect, and we honor them. But isolation doesn't mean ignorance. From the moment your relationship became public knowledge, every human government, corporation, and colony began asking the same question. What happens when someone tries to use us against your wife? David stared out at the fleet assembled outside the viewport. So you've been preparing for this specific scenario. We've been preparing for every scenario we could imagine. David, your marriage didn't just make you a target. It made all of humanity a potential weakness in galactic politics. We couldn't allow that. The ships, the technology, the coordination. How did you hide all of this from galactic intelligence networks? Admiral Chen's smile widened. We didn't hide it. We made it invisible by making it look exactly like what everyone expected to see. I don't understand. Every ship in this fleet exists in official records as exactly what it appears to be. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, research ships, colony transports. And that's exactly what they are 90% of the time. David's eyes widened as the implications sank in. Dual-purpose vessels. Every human ship built in the past 5 years has been designed with conversion capabilities. Cargo holds that can mount weapons systems. Sensor arrays that double as targeting computers, life support systems that can handle military operations, and, most importantly, crews that are cross-trained for both civilian and military operations. But the coordination, the tactical doctrine, comes from something uniquely human, our entertainment industry. David blinked in surprise. Our what? Admiral Chun gestured to a display showing the tactical formation that had surrounded the Vortak fleet. David, humans have been imagining alien invasion scenarios in movies, books, games, and simulations for over 2 centuries. We've explored every possible tactical approach, every strategic doctrine, every coordination method that could possibly work. You're saying we developed our military strategy from science fiction? I'm saying that when a species spends 200 years imagining how to fight impossible odds against superior enemies, they get very good at it. Every human child grows up playing games about defending Earth from alien fleets. Every human military academy studies historical scenarios where smaller forces defeated larger ones. Every human engineer thinks about how to turn civilian technology into military advantages. The scope of what David was learning was staggering. How long has this been going on? Seriously? Since first contact protocols were established 60 years ago. But it accelerated dramatically when you married into galactic royalty. Admiral Chin stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the human fleet. David, there's something else you need to understand about what happened here today. This wasn't just about defending humanity or protecting your wife. This was about sending a message to every power in the galaxy. What kind of message? That humanity isn't a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be respected. That attacking us doesn't hurt Queen Zara THYSS. It demonstrates why she chose to ally with us in the first place. Before David could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. It's also why I fell in love with you. Both men turned to see Queen Zara THYSS entering the observation lounge, her massive frame moving with fluid grace despite the human-scaled environment. David immediately went to her, and she wrapped her forearms around him in a protective embrace. Zara, how long have you been listening? Long enough to realize that my husband still doesn't understand what makes his species so remarkable. Admiral Chun nodded respectfully to the Queen. Your Majesty, I was just explaining our defensive preparations. Admiral, what you accomplished today goes far beyond defense. You've demonstrated something that will reshape galactic politics for generations. How so? David asked. Zara turned to him, her golden eyes serious. My love, every species in the galaxy fights according to predictable patterns. The Vortak conquer through overwhelming force. The ethereals manipulate through superior technology. The hegemony controls through economic pressure. But humanity just demonstrated something completely different. What's that? You fight by becoming whatever you need to become. The Vortak came here expecting to face primitive vessels with basic weapons. Instead, they found a fleet that had transformed itself from civilian infrastructure into military capability in a matter of days. You didn't just outfight them, you out-evolved them. Admiral Chun was nodding. Adaptability has always been humanity's greatest strength. But until today, we've never had the opportunity to demonstrate it on a galactic scale. The implications are staggering, Zara continued. Every military strategist in known space is now trying to answer the same question. If humanity can do this with a few days' warning, what could they do with months or years to prepare? And what's the answer? David asked. No one knows, Zara replied. And that uncertainty is more powerful than any weapon. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Admiral Chin activated the display, revealing Director Martinez from Earth. Admiral, Your Majesty, David, she said, her expression grave. We've received a formal request from the Galactic Council. They want to convene emergency sessions to discuss the human question and the implications of today's events. What kind of implications? David asked. Political, military, and economic. David, the human fleet didn't just defeat the Vortak. You've demonstrated capabilities that call into question every existing treaty, alliance, and power balance in the galaxy. Queen Zara's expression grew thoughtful. Sarah, what exactly are they proposing? They want to reclassify humanity from a developing species under protection to a major galactic power with full diplomatic status. They're also proposing new treaties that would formally recognize the Human-Altarian Alliance and establish protocols for human participation in galactic governance. The observation lounge fell silent as the implications sank in. David looked between his wife and his great-uncle, seeing the same realization in both their faces. They're not just recognizing our military capability, he said slowly. They're acknowledging that the galaxy has to make room for humanity as an equal partner. More than that, Admiral Chen added, they're admitting that the old system of managing primitive species doesn't work when the primitive species can field a 1,000-ship fleet on short notice. Zara's forearms tightened around David. My love, this is what I meant when I said your people were remarkable. Most species take millennia to develop from first contact to galactic power status. Humanity just did it in 50 years, and nobody noticed until you chose to reveal yourselves. So what happens now? David asked. Now, Director Martinez said from the display, humanity gets to decide what kind of galactic power we want to be. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. And the rest of the galaxy gets to adjust to the fact that the quiet species from the Outer Rim just became one of the most influential civilizations in known space. David looked out at the human fleet, still arriving in ones and twos from across human space. Cargo ships and mining vessels that could become warships. Research vessels that doubled as reconnaissance craft. Colony ships that could serve as mobile bases of operation. His species had spent centuries dreaming about contact with alien civilizations. They had imagined every possible scenario, planned for every contingency, and prepared for every threat. But in all their imagination, they had never considered this possibility, that when the test came, they would pass it so completely that the galaxy itself would have to change to accommodate them. The quiet species from the Outer Rim had just announced themselves to the universe. And the universe was listening very carefully indeed. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, 442, as historians were already calling it, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. The Great Assembly Hall of Nexus Station had been modified to accommodate humanity's first official representative to the Galactic Council, and the changes were more than just architectural. Ambassador Sarah Martinez stood before the assembled representatives of 137 species, her calm demeanor belying the historic significance of the moment. Behind her, a holographic display showed the current territorial map of known space, with human colonies now marked in blue alongside the other major powers. Honored representatives, she began, her words carried through translation matrices to every corner of the hall. 6 months ago, many of you viewed humanity as a minor species under the protection of larger powers. Today, we stand before you as equals, ready to take our place in galactic civilization. Chancellor Mordun of the Ethereal Collective leaned forward in his crystalline chair. Ambassador Martinez, the Council appreciates humanity's willingness to engage in formal diplomacy. However, many of our members remain concerned about the implications of your species' rapid advancement. What kind of implications, Chancellor? Representative Clefvar from the Hegemony Federation raised a tentacle. Ambassador, in the 6 months since the Vort hack incident, our intelligence services have identified over 40 human colonies that were previously unknown to galactic cartographers. How do we reconcile this with the isolation treaties that supposedly limited human expansion? Martinez smiled slightly. Representative Clefvar, the isolation treaties limited human participation in galactic politics, not human exploration and settlement. My people are naturally curious. When you tell humans there's a vast galaxy full of uninhabited worlds, we tend to go look at them. But the scale, Clefvar protested, is entirely consistent with human nature, Martinez continued. We're a species that send explorers to every corner of our homeworld despite having no idea what they might find. Did you really expect us to behave differently when we discovered faster-than-light travel? Across the chamber, Ambassador Vexanael of the Silicon Consortium chimed in with her crystal voice. The concern, Ambassador, is not human exploration, but human capability. Your fleet demonstrated technology and coordination abilities that suggest your species has been advancing far more rapidly than anyone realized. Which brings us to the real question, added Chancellor Mordun. How do we integrate a species that can field military capabilities rivaling ancient powers, apparently, without anyone noticing? Before Martinez could respond, a new voice cut through the chamber. Queen Storyci-Fi entered the hall, her massive form commanding immediate attention from every representative present. Behind her walked David Chun, now wearing the formal diplomatic regalia of a special cultural advisor to the Galactic Council. "If I may, Chancellor," Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who ruled 14 star systems, "I believe you're asking the wrong question." "Your Majesty," Mordun replied carefully, "please enlighten us. You're asking how to integrate humanity into existing galactic structures. But the events of 6 months ago demonstrated that those structures have already changed, whether you acknowledge it or not." David stepped forward slightly. The Galactic Council has operated for millennia on the assumption that technological advancement follows predictable patterns, that military capability develops slowly, and that new species can be managed through gradual integration protocols. Humanity just proved that those assumptions are no longer valid. Representative Zelnaga from the Silicon Consortium pulsed with agitation. "Are you suggesting that human advancement threatens galactic stability?" "I'm suggesting that human advancement reveals how fragile that stability actually was," David replied. "A single species was able to threaten the Alterian Empire by targeting civilians precisely because the galaxy's power structures assumed such tactics would be effective. Humanity's response demonstrated that those assumptions were incorrect." Ambassador Martinez activated the holographic display, showing recorded footage from the Battle of Kepler, 442. "Honor representatives, what you witnessed 6 months ago wasn't just military capability. It was adaptability. When threatened, humanity didn't rely on existing doctrine or traditional responses. We became what we needed to become. And what are the implications of that adaptability for galactic civilization?" asked Chancellor Mordun. Queen Zara stepped forward to stand beside her husband. "The implications are that the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." Over the following hour, the human delegation presented their formal proposal for integration into galactic society. It was unlike anything the Council had ever received. Rather than requesting membership in existing alliances or seeking territorial concessions, humanity proposed something entirely different. A new model for galactic cooperation based on adaptive response networks and distributed defense systems. Traditional galactic politics assume that each species develops along predictable lines, Martinez explained. Technological species like the Ethereals focus on advancement. Military species like the Alterians focus on order. Economic species like the merchant guilds focus on trade. But humanity doesn't fit those categories. "How so?" asked Representative Thex from the merchant guilds. "We're generalists by nature," David answered. "When humans encounter a problem, we don't just develop a solution. We develop multiple solutions and then combine them in unexpected ways. Your intelligence networks couldn't track our military development because we didn't develop it separately from our civilian infrastructure." Ambassador Martinez brought up a new display showing human space in detail. Every human colony is simultaneously a research station, a manufacturing center, a training facility, and a potential military base. Every human ship is designed for multiple purposes. Every human citizen is educated in multiple disciplines. This level of redundancy must be incredibly inefficient, observed Representative Clefvar. In a short term, yes, Martinez agreed. But in the long term, it means that humanity can respond to unprecedented challenges with unprecedented solutions. Like converting a civilian fleet into a military force in a matter of days, added Zara with what might have been pride. Chancellor Mordun was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Ambassador Martinez, are you proposing that humanity serve as some kind of rapid response force for galactic crises? We're proposing something more fundamental, David replied. We're suggesting that the galaxy needs a species that specializes in solving unsolvable problems. The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this proposal. Finally, Ambassador Vexanael spoke. What would humanity require in exchange for such services? Martinez smiled. Nothing more than what we already have. The freedom to explore, to grow, to learn, and to protect the people we care about. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help it adapt to challenges that traditional approaches can't handle. And if those challenges require military action, then the galaxy will have access to a species that has spent 2 centuries imagining how to win impossible battles, Zara said quietly. Representative Thex leaned forward. Your Majesty, with respect, that sounds like a threat. No, David said firmly. It sounds like a promise. Humanity will never be the aggressor in galactic conflicts. But we will also never allow threats to what we protect to go unanswered. Ambassador Martinez activated a final display, showing the current status of the former Vorthak Empire. 6 months ago, the Vorthak controlled 12 systems and threatened their neighbors with constant expansion. Today, their military has been disbanded, their territory has been redistributed to species they had oppressed, and their surviving population has been relocated to 3 worlds under Galactic Council supervision. How did you accomplish this so quickly? Asked Chancellor Mordaunt. By treating it as a logistics problem rather than a military one, David replied. Instead of occupying Vorthak space, we simply made continued aggression impossible by removing their capacity for interstellar warfare while providing alternatives for their civilian population. The Vorthak were given a choice, Martinez continued. Adapt to peaceful coexistence or face economic and technological isolation from the rest of galactic civilization. They chose adaptation because humanity made the alternatives unacceptable, observed Representative Clethvar. Because humanity made cooperation more attractive than conflict, Zara corrected. This is what I meant when I said my husband's species was remarkable. They don't just win battles, they make battles unnecessary. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity's demonstration of capability, combined with their proposal for adaptive cooperation, represented exactly the kind of innovation galactic civilization needed. When the final vote was taken, humanity was formally recognized not just as a major galactic power, but as the first species ever granted special advisory status by the Galactic Council. It was a new category, created specifically to accommodate humanity's unique role as problem solvers and crisis responders. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber, David found himself standing beside Chancellor Mordaunt. Mr. Chun, the ancient ethereal said, may I ask you something in confidence? Of course. Did humanity plan all of this? The marriage to Queen Zarathustra, the hidden military development, the response to the Vorthak threat, was it all part of some elaborate strategy to gain galactic recognition? David smiled, thinking about his first meeting with Zara, their quiet wedding ceremony, the 5 years of genuine love and partnership that had followed. Chancellor, humans are very good at planning for contingencies. But the best things we do usually happen because we follow our hearts rather than our strategies. I don't understand. I married Zara because I loved her, not because of any political calculation. But when someone threatened the person I love most, humanity responded the way humans always respond to threats against family. We became whatever we needed to become to protect them. Chancellor Mordaunt's translucent form shimmered with what might have been understanding. And now the galaxy has to adapt to the fact that humanity considers it all family. Not yet, David replied, looking around the great assembly hall at the representatives of species from across known space. But we're working on it. Later that evening, in their private quarters aboard the Altarian royal ship, David and Zara stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars stream past as they traveled through hyperspace toward home. Do you think we did the right thing? David asked, revealing humanity's capabilities, accepting galactic recognition. Are we ready for this responsibility? Zara's 4 arms encircled him protectively. My love, readiness isn't something you achieve, it's something you demonstrate. And today, humanity demonstrated that they're ready to help shape the future of galactic civilization. Even if that future is completely different from what anyone expected. Especially then, Zara replied with a rumble of satisfaction. The galaxy has been following the same patterns for millennia. Perhaps it's time for something new. David leaned against his wife, feeling the steady rhythm of her dual hearts, and smiled. 6 months ago, he had been a simple cultural advisor married to an alien queen. Now, he was humanity's informal ambassador to a galaxy that was still trying to understand what his species represented. But perhaps that was the most human thing of all, to find yourself in an impossible situation and simply adapt until it became possible. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, but now they danced to a new rhythm. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as subjects or supplicants, but as partners in shaping whatever came next. And the galaxy, for all its ancient wisdom and established patterns, was learning to dance along. The future was unwritten, full of possibilities that no species, not even humanity, could fully anticipate. But for the first time in millennia, the galaxy faced that uncertain future with a species that specialized in turning uncertainty into opportunity. The quiet species from the outer rim had found their voice, and the universe was eager to hear what they had to say next.